What is up, crew? It's your boy Kaycem, and today's stream we're going to be going over how to draw the head and the neck. It'll be the core fundamentals of drawing these things out, and I'll be going over a few tips and tricks as well that you'll be able to use for your own drawings to make sure you're getting some of that juicy head drawings. A few things that we're going to also cover today is how to get a little bit of a stylization, because some of you might not draw in a realistic style. Maybe you're drawing in a cartoon style or an anime style or whatever have you. And so today's stream we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Now, if it's your first time here, my name is Kaycem. I am a Filipino art streamer here on Twitch, and I teach everything from anatomy, gesture, perspective, and all things character design. And I also currently work full-time in the animation industry for the studio that made Castlevania. So if you guys are interested in some free art education, or you're just looking to hang out with my dog over here, make sure you follow on Twitch, subscribe on YouTube, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Whoo, man, I'm getting good with these intros. One take, Andy, no script necessary. We just go. We're just out here. Thank you guys for everybody typing hi YouTubes in the chat. But let's start with the first one here today, which is going to be this reference up here. I think it's a good one to start off with. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about when approaching this reference is mostly just talking about a few of the tips that I do whenever I'm trying to draw a head, but also giving you guys some advice on some common mistakes I see beginners make when they draw heads, but especially in something like this angle. All right. But so for this one right here, I wanted to go over some of the angles here, because I think we've done a lot of angles in the last stream where I showed you guys kind of the tilting your head up angle and stuff. But now we're going to do it the other way around, and I'm going to show you some examples of characters where maybe their heads are tilted downwards and how we might approach some of these things as well too. And again, part of it is also going to be talking just about some of the general structural advice I would give when it comes to drawing heads. And you'd be surprised, for work, this is actually a common, these shots right here are common shots in animation, and you kind of have to know how to do these. Like, these are seeing a character, like looking down on a character like this on a close-up zoom face shot. Common shot. I had to do a bunch of these the other day. Yesterday, in fact, I did a shot just almost like this. And so these are good to practice, good to get comfortable with, especially for those of you who are looking to get into animation, or just even looking to spice up your character designs and give them a bit more of a dynamic feel, you know? And so one of the common things that we talked about last stream was really just kind of visualizing the structure. And so I want to do that again this stream, where I want to show you guys a little bit of how I visualize the form. And so here, even though we're drawing like a round shape and stuff, and it's a pretty complex form, what I'm trying to also do is I'm trying to imagine here as if this was a 3D plane, right? So imagine if this was a box that you could fit this head in. And so this is kind of what I like to visualize when it comes to drawing my characters, right? So here you can kind of see. Here's my box here in perspective. And it's not super accurate, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be exactly accurate. I just wanted to show you guys a bit of a demo there. So let me just kind of shrink it down a bit so it matches up better. But I always try to visualize, again, these planes, because if you can do this, I think it'll really help you to start understanding, like, okay, the head is this way in perspective, and if the head is like this in perspective, that means I can line up the facial features in perspective as well, right? Because now that we see this, we can say, okay, cool, that means that the eyes are going to land right here. The brows are going to land somewhere like right here. Maybe the nose lands somewhere like right here. And then we have that hairline, which lands somewhere like right here. And all of those things are going to be in perspective, or at least in the relative perspective that we've established for this face, right? So I think in this case, what I'm trying to really focus on here, and what I want you guys to really, get out of this, is the idea here of perspective, and how even when you're drawing something complex like a face and you're not drawing buildings or whatever, perspective still exists, and it actually is applied across all the details that you're seeing in a face, things like the eyes, the brows, and all of that, right? So this was something that I had to learn. And here's the thing, even when you know it, even when you hear to do it, it doesn't actually necessarily mean that you're like just knowing about it doesn't mean that you're going to actually do it when you draw, right? And what I mean by this is like, let's say you watch a YouTube video, right? You watch a tutorial and you're like, wow, I've learned so much. But it is not until you actually practice and apply these things yourself that I feel like you are truly learning the skills that you are, hearing about and stuff. So I highly recommend you guys, when you do your drawings and stuff, try to look at some of the perspective, look at some of the structure and the proportions there, and see if they still line up well. Because, they might not. And that might be part of the reason why you feel like maybe the eyes are lopsided or why the nose feels a little off, right? So I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about there. But anyways, let's go back here, and I'm just laying out some of the general perspective that we have right here. Okay, so you can kind of see how the perspective there is important. But now let's kind of go in here and let's actually start just drawing out the face and stuff. All right. And thank you for the follow, Sharma Ronan. Welcome in. General perspective. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, right? People think, oh man, Kaycem, when are you going to cover perspective? When are you going to talk about like buildings and all that stuff and 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective, fisheye lens and all of this and stuff. But it's interesting because perspective is actually such a core fundamental that it exists in almost everything we do with our drawings, as long as we're considering form. And so naturally, even when we're drawing a character like this, if it's just a portrait, we can still utilize perspective. You get what I'm saying? So we're going to be talking about general perspective tips. These are some of the things that you'll see there. But here's some other things you want to consider. So when you're drawing a face, something like this, and this is why I chose this reference, one of the things that I want you guys to pay attention to is notice how the face actually curves, right? So a common mistake I see when I see beginner artists and stuff show me, their art and their drawings and stuff, is that it feels flat, right? It feels flat. And part of the reason why I think that happens is because, one, there's not a lot of spatial awareness, but two, because of the way that we might have been taught to draw, like the whole anime style of, hey, draw a circle, right? And then after that circle, draw a line, and then draw a triangle here for the cheeks or for the chin, right? And if you've ever learned that way, which is how I learned when I was a beginner artist and I was reading those how to draw manga books, this is how you were taught, use a flat circle, use a flat triangle. And the problem with using these kind of techniques is it doesn't actually apply, especially when you start getting into the complexities of different camera angles, or when you want to do a dynamic shot or a dynamic face, right? Having that flat face is really not going to help you out at all. If anything, it's going to actually bring you down. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I'll actually, hold on. I'll do this on a new layer so I can show you kind of a comparison of what maybe the before and after and stuff. What does the line that horizontally, or let me put the chat out for YouTubers as well. What does the line that horizontally cuts the square in half represent? What does the line that horizontally cuts the square in half represent? The line that horizontally cuts the square. Oh, you mean, do you mean this one right here? If this is what you're referring to, this line right here that cuts the square in half, that's just where eye level is. So if you ever study a lot of different art styles and stuff, a pretty common thing that artists will do is they'll put the eyes relatively at halfway. And it varies depending on style. Obviously, you might have a little bit over the halfway, a little bit below the halfway. But a good general kind of rule there is that the head usually, or the eyes are usually at about halfway horizontally from where the top of the head is to where the chin is. And again, this is not considering hair volume and stuff, because obviously if you have a character like Yugi from Yu-Gi-Oh, where they got like the spiky hair that's twice as tall as their head, obviously their eyes are not going to be halfway from the top of their hair to their chin, right? You get what I'm saying? So yeah, so that's kind of what I'm talking about there. But yeah, that's kind of the I think that's a good question. Hopefully that answers your question there. But anyways, going back here, so let's talk a little bit about how I would approach this if I were to draw this one normally, and then I'll show you guys what a common mistake would be if that I see among like a lot of beginner artists and stuff when it comes to drawing the head, especially something at this angle, which I think is actually a genuinely tough angle to draw. Again, it's one that I do a lot for work, and even when I do it at work, when I draw angles like this for faces, Man, it's hard. It's genuinely really tough. As I was saying, faces like these are so common, especially in animation and stuff, or at least ones. It depending on the animations, obviously. But if you're gonna look at, let's say, a more kind of like semi-realistic or adult animation, stuff like Castlevania, Legend of Korra, those kind of things, you will commonly see this face angle pretty regularly. And so getting a good hang of it and understanding some of the intricacies of this will actually, I think, be beneficial. So one of the things I want to call out here is, again, when it comes to this angle, I think one of the most important things that you want to do and really start to pay attention to is paying attention to how the face really has a lot of overlapping forms. You'll see that in the brows. You'll see that in the let me clean up the jaw here, or the forehead here, but you'll see that in the brows here. You'll see that in how the nose overlaps certain features as well. And so all these overlaps really kind of compile together to create a bit of depth for your character, but also I think it really helps sell that perspective a little bit more. So I'm just going to go in and kind of rough this one out. Again, today's stream, I'm not trying to make like cool finished portraits like we did here. My main goal today is just to kind of give you guys rough, quick demos, and then maybe at the end, if we have time, I'll do this demo where we actually draw out Denji here, in my style. But you know, I think let's kind of go focus on these things first. And so I think here one of the things that I see is as a common mistake is that you really want to kind of make sure you're capturing the roundness here. And so notice how the brows are really forming this roundness around the head there. So not only are we selling the perspective, but by utilizing and making sure our features match up well, we're also selling a little bit of the form of the head too. So pay attention to these subtle details. Again, I'm not here to teach you how to draw in my style. That's not the goal here. But it's more about kind of tips and tricks that you can make sure you're including in your illustration to kind of push it up even further, right? Okay, I'm going to move this eye just a little bit here just to give it some room. And then I mean, for the most part, I think this is pretty much good for the demo. Again, I'm not trying to draw like a super finished face. Nothing like what we've drawn here for Joel, you know, but just kind of a quick little demo there to talk about the planes of the face and overlap and stuff, because I think that's really important, but also something that I think oftentimes beginner artists, you know, don't really focus on or don't realize exists. So this is definitely a big one to start thinking about, how overlap really helps create depth in the face, how it helps give more structure, how it helps also inform the perspective. So it really does pay off a lot, these like subtle details, subtle overlaps and stuff. Okay, but let's go back in here, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the common mistakes I see, because this is like, let's say, all right, this is how you would draw the head at this angle and stuff. But let me show you guys some common stuff that I see that happens, that beginners tend to do, right? So what I see is, let me move it over here. Or actually, here's what I'll do. I will move this, and this. Oh, and this over here. Okay. So sometimes what I see beginners doing is they'll do something like this, right? They will have the facial features here, but they keep everything really flat. So you kind of put the flatness here. You put the eyes here like this, right? And part of the problem there with having this feature is, again, that's not necessarily how the face works. I think oftentimes, you know, we think it's flat because of the way that maybe we are, you know, how we learn it first, or maybe it's just hard to do. But when you start doing it like this and you have like this flat face, everything feels like it's lacking form. And so again, you lose out on some of that depth. You lose out a little bit on that perspective. You lose out on some of the dynamic energy there by making everything too flat when it shouldn't be, because there are cases where things should be flat. But even in anime, if you take a look at anime and stuff, notice how there's like overlap here. There's some subtle, you know, proportions there that are kind of getting shifted with the perspective. So Um, season 3 or 4 of Invincible. Yeah, I'm working on doing stuff for sure. Hopefully it'll happen, or something will happen. So here, the big difference again is kind of, I would say, don't do this, right? So this is like flat features, right? There's no curving going on here. There's no overlaps, and so you lose out on a lot of that depth. And so you want to make sure when you're drawing your faces, especially from these extreme angles, that you want to try to capture some of that energy, right? That exists. I don't know. Here's a nose. So let me do. I'll go here. I'll do it like this. So like here, notice how the brows really shape some of that form there, right? Notice how that cheekbone also kind of wraps around the forms there, helps kind of establish some of that structure that we're seeing here, right? So all of these little small details, even actually the mouth, right? So the mouth kind of curving like that can also help you get a little bit of that form. So like maybe a common mistake I'll see is something like this, where you just have, you know, the mouth there, and so it kind of feels too flat. I don't know if I want to add this blue line here. It looks like he has like a blue mustache or something. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Did that make any sense, guys? I wanted just to show it. And I know that, you know, maybe not a lot of you are making this mistake, but I know that there are some of you who do make this mistake, because I make this mistake all the time with my drawing. At least when I first started, was being too flat with my features, right? I was called out on the mouth. There you go. Yeah, I knew like one of these things, right? Because you might be like, I don't do that with the eyes at all, Kaycem. But you might do with other things like the mouth, right? It's a very subtle thing. We all secretly have blue mustaches. I know. It's, if you look closely and you squint, we all actually have it. So we got the flow there. So we got here. We've got the I'm gonna call it wrapping. So we're wrapping the forms. Okay, cool. So there you go. That is the first little kind of demo there that I wanted to talk about with you guys. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of group all this together. Let me write down one more thing here. Perspective. Don't forget perspective. Perspective is important. There you go. We did not talk about the back of it. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to take you guys on a quick little detour. Or actually, hold on. Before we even do any of that stuff, let me just talk about a few proportional things, because I think we've demoed this a few times out here. But I want to go over some of the head and stuff really quick. Do I already have a drawing of the head that we can use? Okay, I'm actually going to take this head that we drew here. I'm gonna take this one so that way I don't have to redraw a skull, because I don't want to have to keep redrawing the skull for you guys here. Thank you Parvision, appreciate that. Bots? Are they bots? I don't think you guys are bots today, right? I don't think so. Okay, so let's talk real quick about the proportion here of the skull. And these are going to be general proportions that you guys can use for your drawings. And I think this will be helpful. I think this little diagram here might be the secret sauce, that if there's anything to take away from today's stream, it might just be this one. All right, so let me lower the opacity here of this skull, and I'll lay it all down for you. If you don't mind me asking, how do you quickly flip the canvas on Procreate? I'm fairly new to Procreate and learning the UI at the moment. There's a quick actions tool thing, and then you just set that to flip, and then there you go. Yeah, I don't necessarily know where to go for that, but that's where it is, if that makes any sense. But here's what we're gonna do. Okay, so I want to do let's do it in yellow. Okay, because I like the color yellow. So if you take here, we'll talk about proportions of the head really quick. Okay, because I think knowing this might be helpful for some of you guys who are trying to figure out some of the structure of the head and stuff. Because maybe you're like, you know, Kaycem, I can draw heads in boxes, but what I have a struggle with is getting the features to match up and having the features look and feel like they match. You know what I'm saying? So we'll talk about that too. So let's talk a little bit about proportions and stuff. So one of the cool things about the head is at about the third of the way right here, okay, is going to be the flattest point of the head going back right here. Okay. And also a third of the way down roughly. So I actually did this one a little bit wrong, but a third of the way down here is also kind of where the back of that skull is going to kind of start there. And when you have the occipital bone. So I'm actually going to bring this skull down a little bit here, just to kind of give a general proportional take there. So these are going to be some good kind of just general guidelines to keep in mind. So a third of the way here is roughly, oops, am I in the wrong layer? A third of the way here, we go, is going to be kind of where that back of that skull is going to kind of end, and where we're going to be inserting the spine and all of that stuff, right? And then let's kind of go in and let's go probably about a third of the way this way. So I'm going to say a third here. Okay. So a third of the way this way right here, the 2/3 is going to be where the highest point of the skull is going to be. So this is going to be, I'm going to call this one highest point, and this is going to be the farthest point. This is going to be the back of skull. We'll call it neck insertion. Neck. I'm just making up terms here. Neck insertion. And let's do a few more. So here, okay, here's another one here, a cool one to kind of pay attention to. So this right here, this little section right here is going to be the widest point of the skull. Okay, you can actually kind of touch that in your head right here. It's the widest point in the skull. All right, so again, these are going to be generalizations. Obviously, when you stylize, if you want to draw more of an anime style or whatever have you, you can always change these up a little bit and, you know, have fun with it. But if we're talking about just the general proportions and stuff, I would say this is kind of what you can use as a rough guideline for drawing your heads. And this will come in handy because you might be like, hey, Sam, what's the whole point of this? But when you take this head in 3D, which we'll do later, you'll actually see and understand why this is so interesting and so valuable. But let me go draw the head one more time, but we'll do it kind of at a front facing angle here. Okay, I don't know if I have a skull that I already drew, so I'll see if I have one really quick. That way I don't have to redraw a bunch of skulls. I don't think so. Really? No. I have one. I have some skulls. I know I do. Okay, there you go. I have to go through all my notes that I have. I have so many notes, guys. But let's go back here and let's talk about the back of the skull here. This is, by the way, the occipital bone that I've been talking about. We've been raving about this occipital bone area here. The reason why is because I find that when I was really struggling in the past with drawing my characters and figuring out how the neck connects to the head, it was really just because I had a lack of understanding of what the heck the neck even was, right? Like, how many of you guys have ever struggled with trying to, you know, you draw a great face and the moment you try to put the neck on this character, you're just like, damn, what the hell is going on, right? I think a big part of that is just me not understanding what the heck, what even is a neck, right? It's a structure comprised of so many different things, like the spine, the jaw, the hyoid bone, all the muscles that surround it, the internal muscles as well. And so by demystifying what the heck the neck is, it can actually help you out tremendously when it comes to trying to figure out how to insert that neck into the head here. And so that's kind of what we're talking about today. But some other things I wanted to go over here, we'll go over it in yellow, is when it comes to drawing the head, something that I want you guys to pay attention to is really there's a big taper. All right, there's a tapering here that goes on in the head, so definitely don't neglect that. It's a understatement at this point. So I think this is going to be basically that general structure there. And again, you can really utilize this. I'll show you why this thing right here is important. Okay. I know this is a lot of diagram stuff. Again, we're going to go over all the heavy material stuff first. And then from there, we'll move on to, we'll do some more kind of like fun portrait stuff. Okay. So I just wanted to knock out all the educational content first. And then, yeah. And then we'll continue back here, but I'll show you guys again. I'll take this head that we have. Okay. So I'm going to take this head and I'll show you guys why this is so important. All right. Okay. So as you guys can see here, I'm just laying out the grid here that we have, but you can kind of take a look because see these points right here, this point right here, and these points right here, these are basically going to be the farthest and the highest and the widest points in the head. And this is very important and valuable because this basically helps you establish perspective on the head. So if you guys are ever wondering like, what the heck, Kaycem, how do I establish perspective and stuff? Basically these points right here, this top of the head right here, and this right here are actually relatively flat. And so you can actually use these as good landmarks for establishing perspective on your characters. Okay. Let me go like this a little bit more. But there you go. That's kind of what we have there. Just wanted to give you guys that quick little breakdown of the head here to kind of see that. All right. But okay, I think that's a good amount of tutorial stuff for today. We covered a lot already. What do you guys think? I think that's good for today. So let's go into drawing stuff now. All right. So funny enough, I actually already did a rough sketch for Denji here. But before we even start on this rough sketch that I have here, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the things that I think are interesting about, let's say, the anime style, and we'll use Chainsaw Man as an example. I missed the Skull Bootcamp. Is it going to be on YouTube soon? Yeah, so today's stream will be on YouTube, and also yesterday's stream will be on YouTube. So day 1 and day 2 are they're all going to be on YouTube. But this one probably they won't come out for like maybe a week or so because I have my editors working on them. So I do have editors and stuff, and so they need a little bit of time to just kind of clean up the video a little bit. So stay tuned for that one. But yeah. But okay, let's talk a little bit first about Denji and kind of what I think is interesting about the anime style overall. So one of the things that I think is interesting is I get this question all the time where people come in and they say, Kaycem, like, hey, I know we're covering all this like technical proportions and realistic anatomy and stuff, but how does that actually work with the anime style? I like to draw anime. That's my thing. You know, does it still apply? And the interesting thing about anime and style in general is that really, regardless of the style, the form and having good form and having good consistency is always going to be the most important thing, right? So whether or not you draw your characters in an anime style, a realistic style, or a Western style, or whatever have you, having good form and good structure is always going to be consistent throughout all of these things. Even if you're trying to do a simplified style, like let's say The Simpsons, or even something like SpongeBob, you will actually learn that a lot of that stuff still follows a structure, still follows a form. So I'll show you guys really quick some of the general structures that I'm seeing for Denji. Again, these are just rough generalizations, so I'm not trying to I'm not saying that this is what they're doing, but this is kind of like what I'm seeing kind of thing. So let me go ahead and do a little bit of that and kind of warp it out a little bit. And we're going to utilize some of the techniques that we talked about earlier, right? So we talked about how one, the head is going to be tilting from the top of the head going down. We're also going to be seeing some of the volume here. So the wrapping here of the brow. So you can kind of see that there, right? Then here, let's also bring that back of the skull back too. Okay, so really quick, again, even when you're doing the anime style, right? Even when you're doing the anime style, look at how the proportions and all that stuff still apply, right? This is kind of what I wanted to show you guys, is even when you're doing something like this where it's anime and you're seeing a lot less lines and all that stuff, it doesn't matter. The proportions, there's always some rule in proportions that apply for these things. And so here is the quote unquote anime proportions, right? Anime proportions. But notice how they still follow the rules. So even if you're doing a style that's going to be different, the structure is still the same. Notice here how the hairline, the brows, the nose, and the chin, they're all going to be the same equidistant, right? Space here. The chin's going to be a little bit longer because he's tilting his head up. But it's all 1/3. Let me write it down like this, 1/3. Right, or 1/3 like that. Right, you're still going to have the tapering of the head that we talked about. Right, the head still tapers from the top of the base there. So you can see here that yeah, exactly, like, you know the rules to break it later. But also, even though like the style here, what changes is not necessarily the form and the structure. What changes from an anime style to a realistic style is going to be the facial features, right? So maybe the eyes are going to be a little bit more stylized. Maybe they're going to be a bit of a rounder shape. Maybe the mouth is going to be more jagged because he has that style of shark-like mouth. Or maybe the nose will be simplified. But the placement of things, the proportions of things are going to be pretty consistent. And so learning that will actually benefit you regardless of whatever style you're going for. Yeah. But yeah, I would say this is my Denji drawing. Little rough around the edges, but for the most part pretty solid. Let me add some ambient occlusion to kind of really push it up a little bit there. What do you guys think? This is definitely not like, I don't usually draw characters like Denji. Like this is a very like anime-esque style for sure. Let me add a few little lines there because you know Denji's always a sleep deprived guy right there. But okay, I would say this is pretty solid for this drawing here. Again, I wanted to show you guys, the main reason why I chose this reference today was not because I wanted to draw Denji. I wanted just to show you guys really that despite whatever style you're going for, whether you're going for the more whether you're going for like a more anime style or you're going for a more realistic style, that regardless of all of that, having good general proportions, having good general structure is always going to be pretty consistent there. And even if you take a look at the anime proportions that we broke down here, the proportions are still relatively the same and they still kind of hold true. So regardless of style and stuff, having good form, having good structure will always pay off in the long run. Even if you're doing something crazy stylistic like SpongeBob or, you know, whatever, cartoony, even that has a sense of rule and form and structure, right? So, because I get this all the time. People always come in, you're like, Kaycem, I don't know about this because I do more of an anime style, right? This is more of my style, and it's like, it's the same. They're called fundamentals for a reason, you know. Okay, but let's merge. Let me show you guys a before and after. Okay, so this is what we started off with as my rough sketch. Okay, cleaned it up a bit with the face there, added in some details for the hair, and then there you go. Now what I'll probably do is I'll merge all this together, and I will take the torso here. And I'm also going to shrink it down a bit. Just trying to do a quick transform there. Cool. And then let me duplicate this. Multiply this, 40% opacity this. And then duplicate it again. Motion blur that. And we have here our Denji drawing.